Hello, thanks for being in a new video. This time I have full review of the Xiaomi 14 Ultra. Let's get started. This is Xiaomi's flagship device. In this case, it has no official distribution in Mexico, so let's get to know it, but officially you can't buy it. Although obviously you can purchase it through other importers and more, but you should be aware that you will not have direct warranty with Xiaomi Mexico or anything like that. The same applies to other countries, wherever you are looking at if you do not have official distribution. In Europe, it has been launched at a price of 1,499 euros, so that would be the reference price. Remember that there is also a special edition that includes other photography accessories, but that one is even more expensive. In this case, I will limit myself to talk only about the device without considering the accessory so much. Let's start by talking about the design. Definitely that it has a very attractive front because of the ultra-reduced bezels. It's a slightly curved glass that gives it a very nice look, and also when you slide your finger on the screen it's going to give you a very smooth feel. But it is not only a screen that looks nice, but it is also resistant as it integrates the new Xiaomi Shield glass that comes to replace Gorilla Glass. It seems that more and more manufacturers are betting on creating their own glass, and that is the case of Xiaomi. In this case, I'll be honest, I'm not going to dare to do the test of throwing it to the ground, but I hope it has a good level of resistance. On the sides we will find an aluminum frame that in this case is of a fairly strong grade. Xiaomi has communicated that it is aluminum 6M42. I do not know of such exact terms, but I guess it will also be a very hard metal. On the right side we will find power button along with volume buttons in addition to some bands to help antenna connectivity. At the top there is only one audio output, although it is not centered, so it is a bit strange, it is not very symmetrical in this aspect. On the left side we will find a completely clean frame without any perforation, while at the bottom we will find the tray where you can place 2 nano SIM cards, although you know that this may vary depending on the different markets. We also find there a microphone, then the USB-C port, and finally the speaker with different perforations. Although in this case, apparently the speaker grills above and below could also have some hidden microphone, because Xiaomi mentions that it has 4 microphones and visually I only find 2. The back cover is made of synthetic leather. The truth is that it has a very soft touch. Very nice, very similar to what we find in professional cameras. Then definitely that Xiaomi has been inspired a lot by the cameras. That's why it also integrates this tremendous circular camera module that gives it a very nice look. Although you know that the fact that the cameras are behind a single glass could give it a little more fragility, or you can also get it stained a little more easily. Although in the same way it is easier to clean a single glass than having to clean circle by circle. But in terms of design we are definitely talking about something very nice. In this case I have the edition in black color, but it is also available in white color, and in this case has a small highlight in gold color around this camera module that in this generation no longer comes with a relief at the time of reaching the camera module area. But something curious is that the aluminum frame somehow rounded a little to this back cover, so it protects it better. But anyway, if it falls, obviously because of the enhanced, that is, the camera module will surely be the first thing to hit the ground, so you have to treat it with delicacy and care. However, also the device integrates the IP level of resistance against water and dust, so it can fall into the water even at a depth of 1 meter or 1.5 meters and should not be damaged. And in this case, like any good flagship, we are talking about a device that is neither very light nor very thin. It has a weight of 220 grams and its thickness is 9.2 millimeters, which for a flagship I think is fine. And generally you can use the camera module to recharge it on your finger, so it is quite comfortable to use. The screen is completely good, worthy of a flagship, so let me tell you its specifications. We will find a size of 6.73 inches with a very high resolution of 3200 by 1440 pixels. This very high resolution will obviously allow you to see a sharper content. Especially you could get to notice in the text of very small fonts, as it reaches a density of 522 pixels per inch. So the simple fact of exceeding the figure of 500 is incredible. It's a super detailed screen that also obviously offers us AMOLED technology, and therefore will give us very intense colors, contrasts. The screen looks very good. In fact, through software, You can also select different color calibrations so that it is the one you like best in general that comes by default to me. I really like how it looks. And also within these color calibration settings, you will also find an option where the colors can be adapted to the color of your choice. You will find an option where the colors can adapt to the color of the environment. Then if you are in a warm environment, also the screen will be adapting this to give you a much more natural display, and is something very positive that not many devices on the market today incorporate, so you have to highlight this feature as a positive point. The screen has a peak brightness of 3000 nits, so it is super bright. Although this is obviously when viewing some HDR content at specific points on the screen, remember that when viewing HDR content, there are some areas of the screen that will shine brighter to give more realism, and other areas of the screen that will shine less, so in those environments could reach up to 3000 nits. But anyway, also in the settings, you are going to find an additional brightness mode, especially very useful when you are under the sunlight, is a screen that you are going to visualize with very good quality, and also has a refresh rate from 1 to 120 Hz, so you are going to have a good energy savings, and also at the same time can show you dynamic movement. And something that is not so easy to demonstrate but ultimately is an important data is the rate of attenuation. In this case reaches 1920 Hz, and this means that the flicker that generates the screen will be much less tiring for your eyes. Is something that, as I say, we do not perceive with the naked eye, but definitely helps, and your eyes will appreciate it. But while it is a very good screen and practically excellent in all aspects, there is a point where I can still criticize, and is in the lower brightness is not low enough for a super comfortable use at night. Obviously the screen has different modes of visual rest. There are some filters that you can apply. Even in some cases you can add some texture to the screen to have a more comfortable viewing. However, other devices with Android include an extra dimming option within the accessibility options that you will not find in this Xiaomi device. Then even though you can combine the dark mode with the visual rest mode and more, there are other devices that allow you to lower the brightness to an extreme level, but this not the rest of the parameters of the screen. The truth is that they are very good. It's an excellent display. The device incorporates two speakers, one at the bottom, which will be the main one that will have the greatest presence of bass frequencies and the highest quality, and the secondary speaker is in the area above. Pay attention, because in this case does not have two audio outputs in this part, unlike the vast majority of devices today that could issue its multimedia sound through the headset for calls. In this case, the headset for calls only works for calls and has another speaker on top. This produces that the sound is even wider and more powerful. Overall, I think the sound, if it is the best experiences we will find in this device. In this case, the headset for calls only works for calls and has another speaker in the upper part. This produces that the sound is even wider, more powerful in general. I think the sound, if it is one of the best experiences that we will find in this device, is of good quality, is strong, has good presence of bass frequencies. We heard a small test, but remember that it is not the same. Listen to it live. And as part of the software comes well complemented, because it adds Dolby Atmos, or you can also select Xiaomi sound depending on your preferences, and you can access a 10-band graphic equalizer without any need to have headphones connected, unlike other devices. Then if you allow you to modify the style of sound that are emitting the speakers, and with this you win a lot of customization. And although it has no headphone jack, if you are going to use Bluetooth headphones, you could use high-resolution headphones as if it is compatible with advanced codec as the HDC in its version 3 LDAC aptX adaptive, and obviously the most basic codecs. Then it does have good wireless sound capabilities, as it should be in a flagship. According to the manufacturer, this device incorporates an array of 4 microphones. Personally, I only see 2, one placed inside the camera module and one placed at the bottom, but possibly the speaker grill are hidden other microphones, or maybe in the headset area for calls. Honestly do not know, but let's hear a test. Esta es una prueba de audio grabada con el Xiaomi 14 Ultra. Definitely, that gives us an excellent experience in terms of voice pickup, although in this case, my basic complaint would be that it emits a vibration immediately after you start recording, and that vibration is recorded in your audio, so it generates a little strange result. Could simply disable that vibration through an update. Hopefully they do it next. We will see a video recorded with this device in a very noisy environment to continue noticing how the microphones behave. Make it shine, but I can see that you don't realize, and that's what made me fall in love. 'Cause you got me so it's amazing all the time. You are the only thing I need in life. Oh, I want you. Can't you see? I want you. From my point of view, is a device that handles its microphones well if there is a very abrupt change and suddenly starts a very loud sound. Perhaps in the first instant there is a slight distortion, but then immediately adjusts its gain to behave well, so it would be a good tool for recording concerts. The front camera is 32 megapixels, has a 2.f aperture and fixed focus. Definitely immediately I can start criticizing that it has fixed focus. We are talking about a flagship device, and the fact of finding fixed focus on the front camera can become one of its weakest points. In this case, fortunately, it integrates a gesture to quickly open the camera. Even if you are inside any other application, which is to press twice the power button, then you can quickly switch to the camera to take a picture. Gesture to quickly open the camera, even if you are inside any other application, which is to double press the power button. Then you can quickly switch to the camera to take a picture. This same gesture will work when you have the screen off. Although it comes disabled by default, you have to activate it in the settings, but it works fine. This camera reacts in a very agile way. If we keep pressed, the shutter starts a recording of a very short video, and sliding the right would activate the burst, but in the front camera is not available, although honestly I do not find it very necessary. Because of the great response that has the shutter as an alternative, you could also show the palm of the hand to activate the photograph, but you have to activate that in the additional settings, and in this way you can have a capture a little more comfortable. In fact, note that we can also add an additional shutter so that we can move it to where we want, and thus also be a little easier to take pictures. The front camera will offer 2 levels of amplitude, 0.8x and 1x, and also in the lower right corner there is a button to activate the beauty options that are many. We have many parameters to go modifying all kinds of things from your face, so it is one of the most extensive and intense beauty modes I've seen on the market. In Selfie, the device has a good color and in fact also a good level of detail, but if you need to be at a specific distance, because having fixed focus, if you are very close or very far away, you will not have a well-detailed picture. But I insist, I really like the color treatment observed. For example, if you are very close, it is not possible to get some detail of your face if you have your arm stretched out to the camera. If you have your arm stretched to the maximum, you can still get a good enough detail, but if you want maximum sharpness, you need to be a little closer to the camera. And this will cause that in group selfies, for example, faces appear very out of focus and with a low level of detail. Therefore, this camera definitely needs to improve. Indoors, I like that again maintains an adequate level of detail. A little grainy, but it is nothing serious really. The device has a good quality in terms of light and color processing in light control conditions. Note that the preview is not yet well optimized, but after processing, I think the result is very good, balancing lights and shadows, although the color of the illuminated areas is still not as accurate. But honestly, I think it is a camera that does a good job in this scenario. However, at night, it seems that it does not have a sufficiently high quality, has a slightly poor light input, appears a little more noise present also in the darker areas, so it does not seem to be a camera of such quality. Although fortunately, even in night backlight, I think it does a good job, but in general terms, the front camera does not seem to have the same quality that we find in the rear photographic system. For example, note that in portrait photography with this front camera, the bokeh effect is exaggeratedly nice, very nice, but notice how the detection of objects is not so accurate. although it manages to focus some of the objects in the foreground, seems not to do so in its entirety, and therefore the result can look a little weird at times, but I insist that the bokeh effect is extremely nice, just would have to correct the detection of the foreground to be much more accurate. The rear photographic system is obviously the most attractive of this device, has many cameras. So let me start explaining them one by one. First will be the ultra-wide camera of 12mm with a sensor of 50 megapixels. The lens has aperture f1.8, has autofocus, so you can have macro shots from a distance of 5 centimeters. It is an ultra-wide camera that definitely in terms of specifications has everything we could ask for, with a very luminous aperture, very difficult to find in this type of camera. In fact, the 12mm that it offers by itself is something very attractive, because usually the ultra-wide cameras of other devices are 13 or 14mm. In this case is the widest I've seen in a smartphone, and having autofocus also gives us more capabilities. The next camera is 23mm with variable aperture from f1.63 to f4.0. It has a 50 megapixel sensor, autofocus and optical stabilization. The remarkable thing about this camera is that it has a 1-inch sensor. This means that it has more surface area for light to enter, and therefore we will have a very good image quality. In addition, the fact of offering variable aperture is another highlight, because currently there are few smartphones that offer this feature, although honestly it does not seem to me a point that gets to take advantage of 100% of the device. But if you have advanced photographic knowledge and know how to handle the manual mode, you will know how to move the aperture at the right time, since this device in general, if you use it in automatic mode, it will almost always take pictures with f2.0 point. But it definitely gives you very good capabilities to have variable aperture, which is something very unusual. The next camera is 75mm with f1.8 aperture. It offers us 50 megapixels on the sensor. It also has autofocus, also optical stabilization, and has macro capabilities at a distance of 10 centimeters. This camera offers us an equivalent sum of 3.2x's for those who are more familiar with smartphone terms. So again, it stands out for a good aperture, because usually telephoto lenses have a lower light input. In this case, we find f1.8. Remember that the smaller the number, the greater the light input, so it's very good in terms of its specs. And the fact that it has macro capabilities is also something that is unusual in smartphones. So definitely that Xiaomi has wanted to incorporate the best it currently has available for the photographic system. But that's not all. There is yet another camera. We are talking about the 120mm, that is an approximate 5x zoom with 50 megapixels on the sensor. In this case, it has f2.5 aperture, autofocus, optical stabilization, and also has 30cm macro capabilities. In this case, it's a periscope camera, so it has a little bit of a different format to try to magnify the image more. And again, considering you have a 5-equis optic, it has a good aperture for good light entry. So all the cameras are very good, they all have autofocus. Let me tell you more or less what's in the interface, and then we'll look at the results. As always, the preview has a little bit of a delay, but as you notice, trying to capture number 3, we almost always have a very good response in the capture speed. The burst takes about a quarter of a second to start, but allows us to take up to 50 shots to extract the exact moment, although I would like it better if it was a longer burst time. Something I like is that this device is able to take advantage of its sensor very well, so that for example it allows you to take pictures of 28 or 35mm, and not only the pictures of 23mm with the traditional distance. In fact, also if you take the 48mm pictures, we are going to find optical quality, and the same thing will happen with the other lenses that are going to give us very good quality. And notice that also in the last setting we can press again to adjust to 240mm or up to 720. So the zoom controls are very nice. We also find an exposure compensation control directly on the main interface. And in the bottom right corner we also find some color filters that we can be placing on our pictures, and also the beauty mode with a single slider. In this case, Leica has 2 image settings, Leica Authentic and Leica Vibrant. So you can choose the color representation you like the most. There is also a motion capture mode for scenes with a lot of action. If you tap on the screen, you can adjust the exposure and also the focus. And interestingly, in this case, in the additional menu, they add the aperture control to change it and set it manually. So you can select what aperture you want the device to work at between these 4 different levels. And obviously, within the professional mode, we're also going to be able to change the aperture, in this case in a much more specific way. In this manual mode, we can also manipulate the white balance, the focus, the shutter speed, which can go up to 30 seconds, the ISO, which can go up to 12,800 with the main sensor, and the exposure compensation. In this case, we are also going to be able to take pictures in RAW format for more advanced development, even ultra RAW. And you can also enable a histogram and also zebra to avoid overexposed areas. So it has really nice tools that we usually see in professional photography. And one thing I like is that you can create your own manual parameter presets so you can access them very quickly. And changing the subject, notice that in this case, the documents, it doesn't detect them directly in the main interface, so simple, but you can quickly access the document function and notice that it's not only going to crop the photograph, but it also includes a button that's going to allow you to apply some optimization to this photograph to make it look like a much more professional scan, although it doesn't let you add pages or anything like that. And finally, QR codes can also be detected very easily. It adds a little button in the bottom right corner that you can press to access the action. But in this case, we can use the high resolution mode with all the cameras, which is very amazing. So notice how the ultra wide camera is able to give us an extremely detailed image if we capture it in this high resolution mode. The main camera will also have a very good resolution to be able to get us close to see maximum details in this mode. Also, the intermediate zoom camera has very good detail. Notice how we can again zoom in and crop some pictures. And the funny thing here is that also the high resolution zoom camera has this high resolution sensor to give us some extremely detailed pictures. In the case of moving images, you will notice that with all cameras we have a good experience, both with the ultra-wide camera and with the main camera, also the intermediate zoom camera. And the remarkable thing is that even the maximum zoom camera, which is the one of a few millimeters, you will notice that it will also give us very good captures in motion. At no time is a picture blurred or with a poorly defined movement. Regarding the quality of the cameras, it seems to me that the ultra-wide camera is lacking. Its strong point is its width, because it is a 12mm camera. That is, it is super wide, something that is rare in the smartphone industry. But note that that's going to produce a fairly noticeable distortion appearance in the corners. So in that sense, I didn't like the camera as much because of this distortion and even chromatic aberration that it can show. The four corners appear very out of focus, so definitely not such a pleasing result in that sense. However, in color processing, it does a good job. The 23mm main camera offers us a very good quality. In this case, we are talking about a much more advanced lens, which, as you realize, does not have distortions on the edges, it does not generate so much chromatic aberration, and the color processing again is very good. Remember that this has been worked on hand in hand with Leica, and I really think the result is noticeable. Although curiously, with the 46mm setting, the results seem to me a bit strange in color, especially when compared to the previous photograph. Notice how the color has completely changed by removing the warm tones. So maybe this can be corrected with some updating. But speaking specifically about the quality of the image, I think the result is very good. Note that in this case we are talking about a crop inside the sensor to give you 2x pictures with optical quality. In that sense, the result is very nice. With the 75mm camera, we also have a good image quality. Although again, the result looks a little less warm in color compared to what the other cameras were giving us, but either way, it is good detail and good contrast. And with the 120mm camera, it looks to me like it has a little more of the warm color that the other scenes had. And just as you are seeing, the result is super detailed. The depth of field effect it generates is very nice by blurring the objects that are a little closer, to give a special emphasis to the area you want to focus on. So the results look very nice in this regard. Indoors, you can see that it will also behave well. There is a bit of graininess, but I think the picture looks very good, with good contrast, good detail, and above all, good colors. The main camera is going to improve, especially capturing a bit more lighting in the darker areas. But notice that also applying the crop inside the sensor for the zoom 2x, we found a good result. Even with the 120mm camera, we also have a good result despite not having so much illumination. And also the 75mm camera gives us a good result. This is all thanks to the fact that all the cameras have a remarkably bright aperture, so it helps that even in these scenarios we have good results. In backlit scenarios, note that the preview looks very good. unlike other smartphones that might completely burn out the backlit background. And the result observes that it is good with respect to the ultra-wide camera, balancing highlights and shadows well. The main camera seems to overexpose a bit more the illuminated area, but either way I find the result to be pleasing. With the 75mm camera we have a nice result as well, balancing lights and shadows well. And also, the 120mm camera does a good job. In fact, in this case, I love the bokeh effect generated, obviously completely physical. In this setting, we don't have any virtual bokeh or anything like that. So you notice the precision in all of this, giving a super nice result. Although I must tell you that when zooming, the preview doesn't look as optimized as it did with the Uno X camera. At night, you notice that the results are going to be nice in terms of light input. Again, it seems that due to the good aperture these cameras have, they cause a good result. In fact, for being a 12mm ultra-wide camera, it is very remarkable that it reaches the f1.8 aperture. The main camera is the one with the largest aperture and therefore the one that will have the highest quality in this type of night photography. As you realize, it has a very good level of detail, good color. And I should tell you that in this case the night mode is enabled automatically, so it won't make much difference whether you enter night mode or not. The 75mm camera also has a good aperture, and so at night it's also able to have a good zoom result. And even the 120mm camera, if you are in a scene with enough light, you see that it is able to give you a good result. Obviously not as detailed as what the main camera gave us, but it really is very remarkable quality. But let's talk specifically about the full range this camera has. Notice how we have a very wide range, and at each of the intermediate zoom settings we still notice an excellent level of detail. So it's a camera that really performs very well. In this case it's a 10x zoom photograph, and I want you to appreciate the tremendous level of detail that we're going to find in this device. So it has very good zoom capabilities. Obviously, in terms of the letters, it's going to try to further optimize the detail to make them look sharper. The maximum zoom is 120x, although obviously it's not going to be something you're going to use on a constant basis. But I want you to see this example now without taking into account the text, because generally text is usually optimized a lot, and sometimes faces are more difficult to capture with good quality at long distances. But notice how in this case it's a very well behaved camera, really. So it's one of the best you're going to find in terms of zoom. The ultra-wide camera has macro capabilities, however, due to its aperture and sensor, it can be a bit complex to take a detailed picture of an object that has different reliefs. However, you could also use the main camera, although in this case, despite having variable aperture, it strikes me that the device does not close its aperture, although it detects that it is a macro capture. In this case, it automatically takes the picture at f2.0 point. For example, notice how the focus is not very uniform, as only some of the pictures will appear in focus, but within the Pro mode you can force the aperture to close to f4.0 point, so you would have a much more uniform focus for this type of macro photography. Therefore, it seems a little strange that the automatic mode does not manipulate well this parameter to take advantage of the capabilities of this device. However, the 75mm lens also has macro capabilities, so you could get to take nice pictures with this lens, although again, because of the aperture issue, you may not have such a uniform focus. However, note that also the 120mm lens has macro capabilities, so the result can become super nice with this lens. Finally, macro photography has pleased me, although it is not 100% perfect due to complications with the aperture of echo within the macro photography mode. Lets us zoom with what we would have an even more detailed result. For example, note how we can take this type of extremely attractive photographs. The device also integrates a panoramic mode that, if it is high resolution, therefore stands out a lot. The quality that is able to offer us also gives us good dynamic range and good color. And for portrait photography, really the result has pleased me a lot. In this case, you should note that it has different styles and also different color effects that we can have thanks to Leica styles. So notice how in this case photography has a little bit darker effect, the bokeh effect is more pleasant, and obviously if it is able to detect the objects in the first plan, even the smallest gaps, it manages to detect them very accurately. So the portrait photographs are very nice, and also they can be of different focal lengths. Notice how the result is with 75mm, and again we see a very nice result. Hair detection seems to me to be good enough. It's still a little bit artificial at times, but the result is really super nice. This would be another style with 35mm, and again you see how even the gaps are very good, although here there's a little gap that it didn't detect very well anymore. But honestly, for being a smartphone, I think the pictures are very good. It also allows us to take pictures with a 50mm setting, applying another color style and another blur effect, but with the same quality. The maximum in portrait is 75mm, so it's still not as spectacular as what we would find, for example, on the iPhone or other devices. But I insist that the result is very nice. There are some slightly weirder effects that generate some glow and a distinct bokeh effect. Honestly, I didn't really like it because it looks like it's a bit of a blurry photo. And it also allows us to take pictures with the 23mm setting, although it's not as appealing in this sense because it doesn't have a telephoto perspective. And finally, with Leica's natural setting, I find that the colors are very accurate with good blur. So portraits, I think, do become an attractive point on this device. For video recording, you'll find very good capabilities, as you can go up to 8K at 30 frames per second or 24 with any of all the lenses. So they have excellent video recording capabilities. The main camera can even go up to 4K up to 120 frames per second. And the rest of the cameras are also enabled in 4K up to 60 frames per second. So, all the cameras have a very good video recording utility, unlike other devices where the main camera is the only one that has great capabilities. It also includes a button to have a master cinema coloring that gives a little more subtle touches to your video recording. It also includes an HDR mode, and when you start your recording, note that quick shortcuts are still enabled to switch between different focal lengths, and you can also slide it as a simple ring. There is also a button to pause and resume your recording, another button to take pictures, but unfortunately you can't rotate to the front camera without needing to stop your video recording first, and you won't be able to turn on the flashlight without having to stop your video recording first. This is something I would definitely like to see updated. There is also a button for you to select different LUTs and color styles, although in this case the resolution drops to full HD, but as you can see we have a lot of presets, so we can choose the color we like the most in our video recording, and it also includes a beauty mode with a single slider. And within the professional mode we can also switch to video recording mode, so even while you are recording you can manipulate parameters like focus and others, giving us a very professional result for video recording as well. The device even allows us to record in log format to colorize it later in post-production, so I insist that it is a very professional looking tool. This device allows us to record in 8K with all cameras at 30 frames per second, so you could trim for post-production some scene to maintain a good level of detail. Obviously, it is a recording mode that is not going to be so common because it is an exaggeratedly high resolution. Just note that it does not allow us to switch between cameras dynamically when we are recording in this quality, but if you stop the recording and start it again, yes, you will be able to record in this quality with all cameras, which is very remarkable because usually manufacturers will give you this recording quality only on the main camera, but in this case Xiaomi seems to give the same priority to all its cameras, which, as I say, is very remarkable. So you get to reach a very good level of detail even if you record at long distances. Although obviously in this sense the most advisable thing would be to have some tripod or some base for better quality. And remember that going at 24 frames per second, the movements might look a bit more cinematic and not as fluid as some other people like them to be. But if you're shooting in 4K, even at 60 frames per second, it's going to allow you to switch between all the cameras. In this sense, the ultra-wide camera is going to generate a little bit of chromatic aberration in the edges, just like we saw when we were taking pictures, but the main camera is going to be much better defined, with good color, good detail. I like that it has no confusion in focus or white balance, so it seems to have a very good quality. Also, the zoom camera maintains a very similar color to the main camera when you're recording video, so it gives us a very comfortable experience across the whole camera system. In fact, also the higher zoom camera is going to give us a good level of detail, and it generates a completely natural depth of field effect. So it's very nice to actually shoot with this camera, because in all the settings it does a good job. Even the transition between lenses is very good, very snappy. It doesn't really seem to have a lot of problems in this aspect. Indoors, notice how a bit more noise appears if you are using the ultra-wide camera, as it naturally has less light input. If you switch to the main camera, you'll notice that this noise is virtually eliminated. It maintains good color and improves the level of detail. So the main camera obviously is the one that's going to perform better in these kinds of lighting conditions because of the larger aperture that's built in. When you use the intermediate zoom camera, notice how it maintains a good level of detail, although the scene is a little darker, but that's normal. Remember that we are recording in a dimly lit scene, so the result either way is nice. And if we go to the maximum zoom lens, we will also notice that it has less light input, but it still maintains a good treatment of noise, although the color is no longer as saturated. In backlight, we will also have a good quality video recording. If you are a little far away, it may not detect your face. If you get closer, it does detect it to illuminate it a little bit better, but without sacrificing the backlighting. So it behaves pretty well. On the main camera, we're going to notice that the shadow area is a little darker than we'd like, but it maintains very good color saturation. If you zoom in a little closer, maybe it gets to give a little more emphasis to the lighting on your face, but I wish that even being a little further away, it could have this same quality. If you zoom in an intermediate, we're going to notice again that the shadow area is a little bit darker and the highlight area is well exposed. So I think you are not an expert in this kind of backlit videos. You could improve your result. In fact, again, if you get a little bit closer to the camera, maybe he's going to give more priority to lighting your face, and I think that would be the more appropriate result. But if you're a little bit further away, it seems to have complications. Finally, if you use the lens at the highest zoom possible, notice how in this case it's going to overexpose the highlight area. So in all respects, I think the backlight recording could be improved. This device also has an HDR recording mode, although obviously this can only be used with compatible devices to get the highest quality recording. The result, the truth is that it is very similar, although obviously with this additional information so that when you play it back with compatible devices, the illuminated areas have more brightness on the screen. At night, the ultra-wide camera performs well if you have a good light source. Obviously, the darker areas will have much more noise, very similar to what we saw in the indoor scene. I think the best way to record in this type of night scene is to use the main camera, where we will obviously gain much more light and therefore more definition. If we apply zoom, it is advisable to be in well-lit environments to have a still acceptable result, although it loses definition when trying to eliminate noise. So it handles noise well but loses detail. With the maximum zoom camera, exactly the same thing happens, although we even have a little less color. Interestingly, within the video recording there is also a night mode, something that is generally not available on several smartphones when recording video. I think it does significantly improve the video quality, although you can only use the main camera in this mode. But definitely that even in the darkest areas it gets to have good light capture. Although obviously if you are walking or with a lot of movement, it generates certain vibrations that are not so pleasant, but even in the darkest conditions I think the result is still remarkable, and in this case it lowers the resolution to full HD. Regarding stabilization, we are going to find positive things with all cameras. Notice how with the ultra-wide when walking, we have a level of detail. When running, it is a bit more difficult, but even in action scenes, we have a good performance recording in the video. With the main one, something very similar is going to happen. When you are walking, we find a really good stabilization, although when you're running, it can be a little bit more difficult. It all depends on how stable you can hold the device. But generally speaking, if you are running, the standard stabilization is not enough, and obviously if you zoom in, you're going to have a bit more complications in action scenes. But even when walking, the result looks nice. Obviously, the more zoom you apply, the harder it's going to be to maintain good stabilization, but I think it's good enough for walking. The device also integrates a more stable recording mode that they call constant video. Although the resolution is lowered to Full HD, but notice that even when running, if you get to have a much more attractive performance. In fact, it also has a constant Pro mode that will be even more stable, in this case with the ultra-wide camera, and the result really does look very attractive because even when running at high speeds, the performance is very good. This device also has a portrait recording mode blurring the background, and the result honestly looks good. It doesn't look so artificial, the edge detection I think is accurate enough. Maybe in faster movements it becomes noticeable, for example between the fingers of the hands, but in general if you don't have such aggressive movements the result is positive. In fact, if you get closer, the blur will also intensify a bit, although it seems to me that in a natural way and not artificial or virtual. The curious thing is that here it does manage to keep the objects in the foreground in focus, with an obviously pleasant result, although the video looks a bit dark. For the fast camera, the good news is that it comes from 4 to 1800x, so with 4x you can perfectly record movements of people, if you have good stabilization, and in fact allows you to use any of the 4 rear cameras to record this fast camera. So definitely that the result is quite nice, plus it's in 4K resolution. Obviously you could also go up to the faster to record landscape movement, cloud movement and much more advanced things, even plant growth, so they have very nice additional capabilities. Also in slow motion we're going to find very good options because it allows us to use any of the lenses and it can go from 120 to 1920 frames per second. So we can have shots of different styles and in all cases the result will be nice in full HD. Just remember that in the case of super slow motion in 960 frames per second, only the first part is in normal speed and then all the rest of the video stays in slow motion. That is, it does not resume to normal speed in the last part of the clip and that generates a result a little weird. I honestly don't like how it looks in this style because it never seems to resume to normal action. Although evidently the slow motion capabilities are really very good, as I tell you, especially since it does allow us to use the different lenses of the rear camera and not just the main camera. Remember that in this case all cameras will have autofocus as well, so they all have a fast and accurate focus. Only the white balance we will notice that in this type of very fast movements can be altered also due to the predominant color in the scene. But as I say, all the cameras have a fast and accurate focus. Obviously the main camera is not going to be able to focus that close, but if you are at a good distance from an object, it can focus with good precision. And as you know, the zoom cameras are going to have macro capabilities. So they can also focus on these kinds of small objects, generating a very blurred effect on the background, totally naturally. So the result really is very nice in these kinds of scenarios, recording small objects as well. And obviously, since these cameras have such good capabilities, notice how you could also record excellent quality macro video showing some impressive details of super small objects, giving a very nice effect. Although the focus could get a bit too confused in this kind of scenarios, so it would be best to work with manual focus. And here you have a scene showing absolutely all the zoom range it is capable of, from the ultra-wide camera, the main camera, the telephoto camera and the periscope camera. As you notice, it maintains good stabilization and in this case the maximum zoom is 15x. So unlike in photography, in video the zoom is still not that impressive, but it still holds up well anyway. The front camera has good resolution and good level of detail, however it doesn't seem to have such a good quality in light handling, as in backlit environments it will completely burn out the background, although fortunately it maintains a good stabilization, so it is a more or less good camera. Honestly, for a high-end camera, it lacks autofocus and that will definitely affect the video quality. In addition, as I indicated, the backlight does not manage it in a good way. Indoors we will also notice a lot of grain, so it is not a device that will offer us an excellent video recording quality with the front camera in scenarios that do not have optimal lighting. At night something very similar will happen. In fact, when walking around it will generate some strange vibrations as it tries to reduce noise and still show a bit of graininess in the darker areas. So it's definitely not an expert device at recording with the front-facing camera. In fact, if you walk into some much darker area, you'll notice that the device is going to suffer too much and doesn't allow you to illuminate your face through the screen. Although if you stop your recording and start it again, you could turn on the screen as a flash, but it is curious that you cannot turn it on while you are recording. We will also find fast camera with the same configuration for the front camera. The truth is that the result looks good with good quality, and we will also find slow motion, simple at 120 frames per second, but it can also be useful for some scenes. Something very good is the dual mode as it has a lot of settings. Unfortunately though, the front camera doesn't seem to have stabilization while the rear camera does. Ideally, both should have stabilization to have a much nicer result. But note how you can move the position of these images very easily. You can switch from split screen to picture-in-picture mode without the need to stop your video recording. It also keeps the focus on, although the bad news is that it doesn't let you zoom in and out. The good news is that you can move the picture-in-picture mode frame to any position you want. So it's a considerably good mode. Ideally, it would allow you to zoom in and out. However, if you stop recording, you can select another camera before you start recording again. So in this case, you are now looking at the front camera and the main camera. In the previous clip, you saw the front camera and the ultra-wide camera. In all cases, it maintains the same performance. Then we also switched to a view applying zoom. Obviously, to come out with better quality, you'll have to be a bit more static, but you can also use these zoomed views. In fact, you can go up to 10x, although we're talking about digital zoom, not fully optical, but it looks great. In fact, you could also load the view with two rear cameras at the same time. You also have a mode where you can record these clips separately while watching them at the same time on the screen. As part of the software, we will find Android 14 with HyperOS 1.0.5, the latest in both cases. So in this sense, yes, we're going to find obviously what we would expect from a flagship device. In addition, we are offered 4 years of software updates and 5 years of security patches, which is not the most advanced, but I think enough to have a good lifetime with this device. Obviously, around Xiaomi's software, there is still a lot to comment, a lot of controversy for some bugs that were presented in the past. Personally, in this case, I haven't noticed the device malfunctioning, but there could still be some duplication of functions, a little bit of redundancy in the system. So I think it remains to be further refined, but at least it has reached a considerably good level of maturity. At the level of customization, we are going to find one of the best elements, especially because it allows you to customize the lock screen in a very intense way. It has different templates that you can select, where you can also place one of your photos, and the device is able to analyze the depth to place some elements behind you. So it definitely gives a very nice touch to the whole aesthetics of your lock screen, which you can also change in a very simple way. So you can have different skins, like if it's a clock, for example, that you can simply switch between different skins that you already have customized. So it's a nice tool. Also available is the always on display option, where you can place a small cover also with the screen locked, just showing that area illuminated. You can put some analog or digital clock, a kaleidoscope effect. You can set up some other little things. So it's interesting, but if you combine it with the super wallpapers feature, definitely the experience is much more attractive, because notice how simply the wallpaper can transform into this always-on cover. And when we turn on the screen and unlock the device, it also generates this kind of super nice transitions. So this super wallpapers feature seems to me to be one of the most attractive. There is also an option to light up the edges of the screen when you receive a notification and have the device locked. And the device also allows us to change the size of the icons on the home screen, even hide their text for a much more minimalist view. And in addition to the traditional gestures, such as to call the voice assistant or take screenshots by sliding 3 fingers on screen, and similar gestures that are usually present on other devices, also this Xiaomi Ultra adds the option of taps on the back of the device, which is something that is not so common. So you can configure some of the options, although curiously it doesn't let you open any app, but you only have limited options that will be enabled when you give 2 or 3 taps on the back of this device, but it can be a very convenient shortcut. And by the way, speaking of convenience, the one-handed mode only reduces on the Y-axis, so it's a bit difficult to reach the other end of the screen if your hand is not very big. So it's not so functional one-handed mode from my point of view. It also has a feature to enhance the video calling experience, so you could turn on a sort of flash that's going to light up the outline of the screen to try to give you more illumination on your face. However, uniquely for WeChat, it would also add a beauty mode, but we all know that WeChat outside of China is not popular, so I think they should optimize it for WhatsApp or some other apps that are more common globally. This device has a small sidebar that you can enable by making a gesture, and in this case, if you open an app from this sidebar, they are going to open in a floating mode. This device supports a maximum of 2 windows, and obviously you can reposition these windows, you can resize them, but you can't change their transparency. And as I say, not all applications are supported. For example, YouTube will not be available in this floating window format, so it could still be improved. Using the fingerprint reader that is inside the screen, you also have a heart rate reader, although for that I think it is always more advisable to use your smartwatch, but for those who want a quick test, you can use this sensor. The device also features the Mi Remote app, and this is quite surprising because it doesn't actually seem to incorporate infrared, and you'd think they'd have lost that feature. However, they seem to have integrated it inside the camera module, so you can also use this device as a universal remote control to turn on your TV or your air conditioner or any other appliance that supports these types of controls. Inside the gallery, you can also press and hold on any image, and you can save it as a PNG image, although it doesn't have as advanced functions as we see in other devices. But I like that you can also press and hold on an image that has text, and it will extract it digitally in a very simple way. The integrated photo editor allows you to change the Leica watermark type in a very simple way, so if you like to show off your Leica photos, I think you can have very good default settings. It also allows you to add portrait effects after the picture, so you don't need to take a portrait picture, but then you can add these effects and change its intensity with different blur styles. In addition, it integrates artificial intelligence in its editor, so it allows you to delete objects, although not with 100% accuracy, but it does a good job and also allows you to change the type of sky and some other details. And within its gallery, it also includes a creativity section where you can select some photos or videos to apply other effects. For example, you can change the background for some patterns, or you can also give a different style to the background to have a mosaic effect or a grayscale effect with watercolor and similar things. In the videos, you could also add effects that recognize the foreground on your body to have some highlight colors or some overlay effects on your image. These are simple effects, but hey, it's an editor that is already included with the device, for which you don't need to pay any subscription or anything like that. So as you'll notice, the operating system has interesting features, although they could still improve. What I like about it is that it has an X-axis optical motor that does respond well. The feeling it gives in the hand is very good when interacting with the device, although there are still several buttons and sliders that are not so optimized to take advantage of this engine. Regarding security, we find a fingerprint reader inside the screen, as I had already shown you. Its position, I think, is good and comfortable. It allows you 5 different registrations, and obviously it also has facial unlocking, but it's only in 2 dimensions, so we didn't pay much attention to it. It also has smart unlock, but curiously Xiaomi bets on its own implementation, so we discard Google's extended unlock. In this case, it will only work while a Xiaomi device is connected via Bluetooth. So you lose several options that we would find with Google's implementation. For example, you can't select some location where you want the device to be able to stay unlocked, so smart unlocking is not that advanced. On the other hand, the password manager is from Google. But in this case, it is not well configured, since it does not ask for your fingerprint before automatically filling out the forms, and that could be a vulnerability. Although through Google's settings you can enable the fingerprint request, but by default it is disabled. Within the native file manager of this device we will find a secure folder or private folder. It is a bit hidden, so inside the folders you must slide down to reveal this private folder. You can obviously access it with a password or your fingerprint to back up and secure your files. It also has a second space mode with which you can have a kind of dual device. Each space will have its own password, its own files and its own applications, and also integrates the application lock mode so that you choose which applications must request your fingerprint again before allowing access. However, it doesn't have child mode, which would have been a nice addition, and it also doesn't offer a private VPN with which Xiaomi allows you more secure browsing when you're on public Wi-Fi networks, although you can obviously install other VPNs. What it also allows you to do is clone apps to use 2 instances of the same app on this device. And finally, if you happen to lose this device, remember that you have the Google Find My Device function, but in this case also, as it is a Xiaomi, you have an option from the manufacturer, which will give you a little more chance of finding your cell phone or at least blocking it so that it cannot be used. Although curiously these options are disabled, then you have to enter the Xiaomi Cloud settings, and after enabling many permissions you can get to configure this option, which for some reason, as I say, is disabled at the factory. But overall it is a device that offers good security options, although not the most complete on the market. Now let's talk about its battery. Its capacity is 5000 mAh, a capacity very similar to what we see in most smartphones today. So it doesn't really get to be a highlight, since in conjunction with a super powerful processor, in case you demand the work to the maximum, the battery is going to drain a little fast. In my test, applying the drainer in the foreground, it lasted about 3.5 hours, definitely a little below what I would have liked. Usually they can manage to deliver a little over 4 hours, but in this case it wasn't able to reach that figure. However, running this drainer in the background while playing YouTube videos in the foreground, it did reach 4.5 hours. So if you don't apply very powerful jobs to it, the device is indeed capable of giving you average battery life. It's not spectacular. We've seen other manufacturers have much more advanced management or bigger batteries, so in this case it's just average. In this case, fortunately, it has two saving modes, one basic and one more extreme, so that you as a user choose which mode to use depending on your circumstances. Obviously, the basic mode is more focused on the day-to-day and the extreme mode for emergency occasions, but it is always good to have these two power-saving modes. In fact, it also has an extreme mode that adds as much power as possible without worrying too much about the battery, but obviously that mode is not going to be used very constantly. The charger included in the box is 90 watts. I think it's good because it's not as cumbersome or as big as other powerful chargers I've seen, so I like the design and it's also very powerful. In 15 minutes, it charged up to 42% in the test I did. Then in 30 minutes, it charged up to 71% and the full charge was completed in 48 minutes. As you can see, it's a very fast charge that you can really enjoy. It even supports very fast wireless charging of 80 watts, so you would have very similar figures charging wired or wirelessly. That definitely gives a very premium high-end experience, although you have to buy the wireless charger separately. In fact, through software, it also has an option where you can further increase the charging speed, although we have tested it and honestly there is not that much difference, but well, there is that option. As a good high-end device, it also includes reversible wireless charging, so on the back of the cell phone, you could charge your watch or your headphones. Although obviously this is a bit more focused on emergency occasions because it won't be as optimized or as fast charging, but this addition is definitely appreciated. You could even charge your friend's iPhone when it shut down because it ran out of battery. And with regards to battery care, fortunately it does have smart charging options in case you want to leave it charging overnight, which wouldn't be that advisable because it charges very fast. But if you're one of those careless users, the device can learn your pattern and then start taking care of itself. But there is also the charge lock mode up to 80%, which would be very useful, for example, when you carry it plugged in all the time in the car or in some other scenarios where it always has to be plugged in. This allows the battery to not degrade so fast, so it comes well protected. Now let's move on to the connectivity. It will obviously have the most powerful stuff out there. It comes with support for 5G networks without problems, and in fact through software you also have an option to select which applications will be able to access the internet with your mobile data, and which applications will only be able to do so via Wi-Fi to avoid bad surprises. Speaking of Wi-Fi networks, it supports Wi-Fi 7, so definitely that also gives us a very good download speed. Something that I personally consider very useful when you are in a hurry and want to download some songs to listen on the road or want to download a movie or a series with great speed, definitely that you will feel it very well. It also comes with Bluetooth 5.4, which is the latest of today, and in this case somehow it does try to offer you a dual connection to headphones, but the operation is still not so optimized. That is, yes, you could connect a pair of headphones, but at times the volume is handled in a very unstable way between the two devices, so today I still could not highlight it as a useful feature. But obviously we will find NFC to be able to make mobile payments or connect to some accessories, but as a good high-end device does not integrate FM radio. It also has the option to project your screen in an advanced way because you could have the screen off, or you could share only that application while you are doing something else on your cell phone, or you could also hide the notifications so that you maintain a correct level of privacy. You could also have a simple mirrored projection format. It's up to you as a user what you prefer. This device also incorporates the projection through cable. In this case, it will be completely in mirror format, obviously with greater stability than the wireless projection. Obviously, it will also have Android Auto, and in the sensors, it has everything we could ask for: accelerometer, geomagnetic field sensor, orientation sensor. It even has a pressure sensor, which is not so common in smartphones. Obviously, it also has the orientation sensor, and in this case its proximity sensor is completely physical, so we are not going to have any kind of inconvenience or problem when using it. All good here. Xiaomi's ecosystem is huge in terms of number of devices and is currently growing very well in terms of the interaction it is able to achieve. This device with HyperOS includes a feature called interconnectivity, which would allow you to synchronize some things between your devices. You even have a shared clipboard, although it is still a bit slow, and for example from the tablet you could get to use some things from the cell phone. It even has some multi-camera modes with which you can use several devices of this brand and manage them from another cell phone or from a tablet to have different camera angles. So it integrates good options through the ecosystem, although it is still not as advanced as the one we could find in other brands, especially with respect to speed and easy interaction and connection. Also, Xiaomi's computers are not yet distributed in various parts of the world, so the ecosystem feels a bit incomplete in that aspect. However, it does have 3 file sharing options, and that's where I tell you there's a bit of redundancy. For example, it integrates Xiaomi Share, which is compatible with Xiaomi devices or also Realme and Oppo, and with this option you can send and receive files wirelessly easily, but it also has a pre-installed app called ShareMe, which serves you the same purpose, but it's a little different in how it works, and it also has Quick Share from Google, so it's quite curious in that regard. It also has Google FastPay, so you can connect some headphones very easily, and globally it starts to rely a little more on Google, although in China it does have its own cloud. But globally you rely on the Google Photos cloud, which in fact comes integrated directly into the gallery, and obviously you'll also have Google Drive storage. And for control of home devices, you depend on Google Home, although in this case Xiaomi also has an option in the quick settings panel called Xiaomi Smart Hub, where other devices in the Xiaomi ecosystem should appear. And there you also have the shortcut to open Mi Home, which is Xiaomi's app to control all your home devices. So it looks like it's just relying on Google for cloud storage, but it's slowly gaining more traction. Let's talk about performance. This device incorporates the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 processor, the most powerful of today as it should be. It also has 16 GB of LPDDR5X RAM, which will also give us the latest in speed. And you can also add another 8 virtual gigabytes, which I think is completely unnecessary, but the option is available. And it also has 512 GB of UFS storage. As you can see, in this case, it took 2 seconds on average just to open each application, showing us that it has excellent speed. It is a device that will behave very fast, not only because it has a very good processor, but it also has a very fast RAM, and the rest of its components are also very fast, such as the storage. So all of this in total gives you a very good, very fluid experience, although note that here we just saw an application restart anyway, so possibly still need to optimize the system a little bit more for a 100% perfect experience, but in most cases it is able to give you a good agile feeling when you are interacting with different applications. Now let's test how long it takes to export a video recorded on the device. And hey presto, as you can tell, it took 22 seconds. It is exaggeratedly fast in this kind of tasks. In this case, the only drawback would be that it doesn't have a micro SD card slot. However, due to the large amount of internal storage it has, it would not be such a serious disadvantage. Remember that within the security application is Game Turbo, which when you open it changes its name to Game Space. In this application you can manage all the games you have installed, and you can also access a modification of the power that the processor will have at the time of playing, if you want to save energy or if you want to have maximum power. In addition, you can also optimize the touch controls and avoid unwanted touches. And we are also going to be able to change the visual effects in different games depending on how you want them to look. It can be very useful in games that are too dark. And once you open any game, notice that a sidebar will also appear. When you open this sidebar, buttons will appear where you can open applications in floating format, just like we saw outside of games. But it also includes an optimize button where it enables a maximum performance mode and even starts monitoring how the frames per second are going. You also have a button to clear memory and clear storage. Subsequently, we have a do not disturb button. There are also buttons to take screenshots or record screenshots, as well as wirelessly project your screen. It also has a button to optimize everything to do with the Wi-Fi network and another button to change the style of notifications. This can be somewhat useful because in the normal way notifications pop up that get in the way a bit more, but you can enable some ribbon notifications so that these notifications simply run along the screen and don't obstruct the view so much while you're playing. It also has a button to access the voice modifier in case you have a game with voice chat. And finally, timers that are useful for some specific games. In Call of Duty, this device allows us very high quality at maximum frame rate. In fact, we can also go up to an ultra rate, although the graphic quality will drop to the medium level. It is up to you as a user what you want to prioritize. If you give priority to the graphic quality, you will obviously have all the effects available to activate at all times. And if you give priority to the refresh rate, there will be some effects that will be disabled completely. First, we gave priority to the graphic quality, and definitely the experience was very good, very stable with 60 frames per second on average. Nothing else, we noticed that the temperature was slightly higher compared to other devices in this same test, but definitely that it does give you a very good gaming experience with good graphics, good stability, and overall good performance. Afterwards, we tested giving priority to the frames per second rate, which in this case goes up to 90 frames per second. Again, it was a very good experience with very good stability. It doesn't look like the game is really struggling with this processor since, as you can see in its graph, it maintains excellent stability. Although again, the temperature was a bit high, although we must remember that it was recording the screen. In fact, when we stopped recording the screen, we played for another 8 minutes and the temperature dropped to 41.3 degrees Celsius. So we confirmed that by recording the screen, the temperature can rise significantly. But if you don't record the screen, the device stays much cooler. However, in either scenario, it maintains very good stability. In the Legends game, we changed the automatic setting to an ultra setting at 60 frames per second and very similar to what we've seen on other devices. In the first stage, it goes up to 120 frames per second, but after a little bit of time, it drops to 60 frames per second, but in either scenario, it maintains very good stability. So overall, it's a game that will also perform well, obviously with good graphics and everything else. It doesn't seem to have any major complications and the temperature in this case didn't get considerably high. In the SpongeBob game, by default, it curiously has the low resolution with high quality at 60 frames per second, but in this case we increased the resolution and quality to an epic level, and the game actually performed very well. It has a few low peaks, but they don't really affect your gaming experience. It actually again gives us a very good experience with good graphics, good gameplay, the screen responds well. Overall, it delivers as one would expect from a high-end device. And finally, in Henshin Impact, we will find the default high quality, something quite curious, but in this case we go up to very high. We even also went up to 60 frames per second and the motion blur was also set to very high. And again, the experience was really very good. The truth is that the device is able to run this game very smoothly, even recording the screen. Although again, if you record the screen, the temperature can get a little bit higher than we would like, but even it's been a little bit cooler than other devices that we've tested as well. And as I tell you, the experience really is very good. Despite not being a 100% gaming focused device, it can give you a very good experience because it maintains good stability and you can actually play very smoothly. Just if you want to record the screen, it may take a little longer to maintain a comfortable temperature, but otherwise it is a device that has an excellent gaming performance. Then as a conclusion, it seems to me that Xiaomi has achieved an excellent high-end device. It has a good design, it has good screen, it has good sound, it has good cameras. Actually, the front camera may be one of the points that still do not convince me for a flagship. In fact, I also think the software could be improved, polished and optimized to give a more premium experience, but it offers good security options, a growing ecosystem and a very high performance in conjunction with a very good charging speed, although the battery is a little average. But as I tell you, at the photographic level, I think it gets to be very remarkable. This year they have taken their collaboration with Leica to a new level and it has been noticed in the photographic results. So if you are looking for a device that has very good cameras, this option can be very interesting, and in conjunction with their accessories can also give you an experience that you will not find in other devices. For the moment, this has been all for this video. I hope you liked it. If you did, you know you can tell us about it, and see you next time.